October 12, 2006. The sun was setting behind the towering granite peaks of the Sierra Nevada, casting long shadows across the pristine wilderness. What should have been a perfect father-son camping trip was about to become one of California's most haunting mysteries. Marcus and Dylan Hoffman packed their gear with excitement, planning 3 days of hiking and bonding in one of America's most beautiful mountain ranges. They never made it home. For 18 years, their disappearance remained an unsolved puzzle that haunted search teams, devastated a family, and left more questions than answers. But when a wildlife researcher's drone captured something impossible deep in the mountains, everything changed. What that footage revealed wasn't just the answer to where they went. It was something far more disturbing than anyone could have imagined. Marcus Hoffman wasn't your typical weekend warrior. At 42, he was a seasoned outdoorsman who had been exploring the Sierra Nevada since college. As a park ranger for over 15 years, he knew these mountains like the back of his hand. Every trail, every shelter, every dangerous river crossing was familiar territory. His colleagues often joked that Marcus could navigate the wilderness blindfolded. If anyone could keep his 14-year-old son Dylan safe in the backcountry, it was Marcus. But expertise means nothing when you're facing something beyond human understanding. Dylan Hoffman was everything his father hoped for in a son. Straight A student, Eagle Scout candidate, and already showing the same love for nature that had defined Marcus's life. At 14, Dylan had more wilderness experience than most adults. He could start a fire in the rain, purify water 3 different ways, and read a topographic map better than his GPS. Father and son had been planning this particular trip for months. 3 days at Thousand Island Lake, one of the most remote and beautiful spots in the Sierra Nevada. No cell service, no distractions, just quality time in the mountains they both loved. The morning of October 12th, Marcus loaded their blue Ford Explorer with camping gear that represented years of careful selection. Military-grade sleeping bags rated to -20 degrees, a water filtration system that could turn pond scum into drinking water, emergency supplies that could keep them alive for a week if necessary. Linda Hoffman watched from the kitchen window as her husband and son loaded the truck, their excitement infectious, even at 6 a.m. She'd seen them prepare for dozens of trips before, but something felt different this time. Maybe it was the way Dylan kept checking and rechecking his backpack, or how Marcus seemed more serious than usual. When they hugged her goodbye, Linda held on just a moment longer than normal. "We'll be back Sunday evening by 7, Marcus promised. "Dylan's got school Monday morning?" Linda nodded and watched them drive away, not knowing she'd just seen her family for the last time. The drive to the trailhead should have taken 4 hours through winding mountain roads. Marcus was an excellent driver who never took risks, especially with Dylan in the car. They stopped for gas in Mammoth Lakes, where the station attendant later remembered seeing them around 11 a.m. Marcus bought extra water and trail mix, while Dylan studied their topographic maps in the passenger seat. Everything seemed normal. Everything suggested a routine camping trip by 2 experienced hikers who knew exactly what they were doing. The trail to Thousand Island Lake was challenging but well-maintained. At 8.5 miles each way with significant elevation gain, it was serious backpacking that would test even experienced hikers. But Marcus and Dylan had done more difficult routes together. The weather forecast was perfect. Clear skies, temperatures in the 60s during the day, dropping to the 30s at night. No storms predicted. No unusual conditions that would concern even cautious hikers. Park records showed they signed the trail register at the Rush Creek Trailhead at 12:47 p.m., October 12th. Marcus's handwriting was neat and confident. M. Hoffman plus son, 3 days, Thousand Island Lake area. That was the last official record of them being seen alive. When Marcus and Dylan failed to return Sunday evening, Linda initially wasn't worried. Hiking trips sometimes ran long, especially when you were having a good time. But when 9 p.m. came and went with no phone call or text message, concern began to creep in. Marcus was obsessively punctual and never broke promises, especially to his family. By midnight, Linda was calling the Mono County Sheriff's Department. "My husband and son were supposed to be home hours ago," she told dispatcher Carol Martinez. "They're experienced hikers, but something's wrong." Marcus would have called if they were running late. At dawn Monday morning, search and rescue teams assembled at the Rush Creek trailhead, the same parking area where Marcus had left their Explorer exactly 3 days earlier. The vehicle sat untouched, keys still in the ignition, windows cracked to prevent overheating. Nothing appeared disturbed. Dylan's homework folder lay on the back seat, a math test scheduled for Monday morning that he'd never take. Detective James Rodriguez arrived on scene at 7 a.m. He'd handled missing hiker cases before, but something about this felt different. "The vehicle's clean," he told Sergeant Thompson. "No signs of struggle, no blood, no indication of foul play. Just 2 experienced hikers who vanished into thin air." Search dogs immediately picked up their scent along the main trail. For the first 5 miles, the trail was clear and easy to follow. Marcus and Dylan had been hiking at a steady pace, staying on the established route toward Thousand Island Lake. The dogs tracked them past Agnew Lake, past the Junction Trail, following their exact footsteps through pristine wilderness. Then something strange happened at mile marker 6.5. The dogs stopped. They circled, whined, and completely lost the scent. Handler Jim Collins had been working with these dogs for over a decade. "These animals can track a scent for days, even after rain," he explained to Detective Rodriguez. "But they're acting like the trail just ends, like Marcus and Dylan simply vanished." Search teams spread out from the last known scent location. Helicopters flew grid patterns over the rugged terrain, but the dense forest canopy made visibility nearly impossible from above. Ground crews checked every switchback, every creek crossing, every potential camping spot between the trailhead and Thousand Island Lake. Mountain rescue specialists rappelled into ravines and searched cave systems that might have provided emergency shelter. For 72 hours, over 200 volunteers combed 75 square miles of wilderness. They found absolutely nothing. The search expanded beyond the immediate hiking area. Maybe Marcus and Dylan had changed their plans, decided to explore a different route, or encountered an emergency that forced them off the main trail. Teams checked every backcountry campsite within a 20-mile radius. They searched abandoned mining claims, remote fishing spots, and alternative trails that experienced hikers might use as shortcuts. Local news crews arrived, broadcasting updates that drew additional volunteers from across California. Marcus's fellow park rangers took personal leave to join the search effort. Still nothing. By day 5, the search had become the largest missing persons operation in the Sierra Nevada's history. The weather was cooperating, with clear skies and moderate temperatures that should have made survival possible for experienced outdoorsmen. But temperatures dropped below freezing every night, and even the most optimistic rescuers knew that survival time was limited without proper shelter. "We're moving from a rescue operation to a recovery operation," Sheriff Martinez announced during a press conference on October 18th. "We haven't given up hope, but we have to be realistic about the challenges we're facing." The investigation into Marcus and Dylan's disappearance revealed no obvious red flags. Marcus's life was an open book: stable marriage, solid finances, respected career, no known enemies or personal problems. Linda confirmed that their relationship was strong, that Marcus was looking forward to the trip and excited about spending time with Dylan. Bank records showed no unusual transactions. Credit cards hadn't been used since the gas station stop in Mammoth Lakes. Marcus's cell phone went straight to voicemail, but that was expected in an area with no cell coverage. Dylan's friends and teachers painted a picture of a happy, well-adjusted teenager who loved school and outdoor activities. His girlfriend, Emma Chen, said Dylan had been talking about the camping trip for weeks. He was really excited to spend time with his dad and wanted to show him some photography techniques he'd learned in art class. Emma's last text exchange with Dylan was on October 11th, the night before they left. He'd sent her a photo of his packed backpack with the message, "Ready for adventure." She'd replied with a heart emoji and "Be safe." That was their final communication. The insurance angle seemed straightforward. Marcus carried a standard life insurance policy through his job as a park ranger, nothing excessive or suspicious. Linda would receive benefits if he was declared dead, but she showed no interest in the money. She wanted her family back, not financial compensation. The policy was modest anyway, barely enough to cover funeral expenses and provide temporary support, while Linda figured out how to rebuild her life as a single mother. 3 weeks into the search, temperatures in the Sierra Nevada dropped dramatically. Early snow began falling at higher elevations, making ground searches dangerous and helicopter operations nearly impossible. Survival experts agreed that even experienced outdoorsmen couldn't survive prolonged exposure to sub-freezing temperatures without proper shelter and supplies. On November 5th, exactly 3 weeks after Marcus and Dylan disappeared, the active search was officially suspended. "We've covered every accessible area multiple times," Sheriff Martinez explained. "Weather conditions are becoming too dangerous for our search teams. We'll resume operations in the spring when conditions improve." The first winter was the hardest for Linda. She refused to accept that her husband and son were gone. Every few weeks she drove to the trailhead and hiked as far as she could manage, calling their names until her voice gave out. She organized volunteer search parties with other family members and friends, covering areas the official teams might have missed. Local hiking clubs donated time and equipment, spending weekends scouring remote corners of the wilderness. But winter weather made searching nearly impossible, and spring brought no new discoveries. The second year brought a different kind of torment. Linda found herself caught between hope and acceptance, between the desperate need to keep searching and the crushing weight of reality. She started seeing a grief counselor who specialized in ambiguous loss, the unique trauma of not knowing whether your loved ones are alive or dead. The sessions helped, but the questions never stopped gnawing at her. Were they suffering somewhere? Had they died quickly, or did they endure days of agony in the wilderness? The uncertainty was almost worse than knowing the truth would have been. Spring searches resumed with renewed intensity. Snowmelt revealed areas that had been inaccessible during winter, offering new possibilities for discovery. Search teams focused on avalanche zones, thinking Marcus and Dylan might have been caught in a slide and buried until the snow melted. They checked every creek bed, every rocky outcrop, every fallen tree that might conceal human remains. Advanced ground-penetrating radar was brought in to search areas where bodies might be buried under rockfall or debris. The technology was promising, but the terrain was too vast and complex for comprehensive coverage. Detective Rodriguez never closed the case file, but resources shifted to other investigations as months passed without new leads. He kept detailed records of every tip, every theory, every possible sighting reported by hikers and campers. Some claimed to have seen 2 men matching their description near Lake Tahoe. Others reported suspicious activity at remote cabins throughout the Sierra Nevada. Each lead was investigated thoroughly, but none produced evidence of Marcus and Dylan. Most were cases of mistaken identity or wishful thinking by people who wanted to help but had no real information. The 3rd anniversary of their disappearance brought national media attention. Unsolved Mysteries featured their case, broadcasting Marcus and Dylan's story to millions of viewers across the country. The episode generated hundreds of tips, but investigators had heard most of the theories before. Some viewers suggested they'd been attacked by bears or mountain lions, but no animal remains or evidence of predator activity had been found. Others proposed that they'd fallen into hidden cave systems or been swept away by flash floods, but extensive searches of underground areas and waterways revealed nothing. By year 4, Linda had established a routine that helped her cope with the ongoing uncertainty. She worked part-time at a local nonprofit, channeling her energy into helping other families deal with missing persons cases. The work was emotionally challenging, but provided a sense of purpose that grief counseling alone couldn't offer. She also maintained a memorial website with updated photos and information, hoping someone might recognize Marcus and Dylan from their hiking adventures. The site received thousands of visitors but generated no useful leads. Local hiking communities kept Marcus and Dylan's memory alive through annual memorial hikes and scholarship funds. The Marcus and Dylan Hoffman Trail Safety Foundation provided emergency equipment and training to backcountry hikers, helping prevent other families from experiencing similar tragedies. Linda participated in these events, finding comfort in talking with other outdoor enthusiasts who understood the risks and rewards of wilderness exploration. But even surrounded by supportive friends and fellow hikers, she felt fundamentally alone. Year 5 brought a devastating setback. Linda's father suffered a massive heart attack, forcing her to spend months caring for him while managing her own grief and the ongoing search efforts. The stress was overwhelming, and for the first time since Marcus and Dylan disappeared, she seriously considered stopping the active search. Maybe it was time to accept that they were gone and focus on rebuilding her life. Her father recovered, but the experience forced Linda to confront her own mortality and the possibility that she might never learn what happened to her family. The legal system eventually required a decision about death declarations. 7 years was the standard waiting period for missing persons cases, but Linda fought the process every step of the way. She hired attorneys to delay the proceedings, arguing that active search efforts should continue indefinitely. The courts were sympathetic but practical. Without evidence of life or death, legal procedures had to move forward. In March 2013, nearly 7 years after the disappearance, Marcus and Dylan Hoffman were legally declared dead. The insurance settlement provided financial security Linda had never wanted. She used most of the money to fund continued search efforts and support other missing persons cases. A private investigator specializing in cold cases was retained, bringing fresh perspective and modern technology to areas that had been searched before. Ground-penetrating radar had improved significantly since the original searches, and new GPS mapping techniques could identify previously overlooked locations where remains might be concealed. Meanwhile, 800 miles away at UC Davis, Dr. Sarah Martinez was developing drone technology that would revolutionize wildlife research in remote areas. Her specialty was tracking endangered species populations in terrain too dangerous or inaccessible for traditional fieldwork. The drones were equipped with high-resolution cameras, infrared sensors, and advanced GPS systems that could map areas with unprecedented accuracy. Dr. Martinez had no idea her research would soon solve one of California's most puzzling missing persons cases. The breakthrough came during a routine wildlife survey in September 2024, exactly 18 years after Marcus and Dylan vanished. Dr. Martinez was tracking a wolf pack that had recently been spotted in the Sierra Nevada, the first confirmed wolves in the area for over a century. The animals were moving through extremely remote terrain, following ancient migration routes through valleys and ridges that few humans had ever explored. Her drone was equipped with the latest camera technology, capable of detecting heat signatures and movement patterns from incredible distances. At 3:42 p.m. on September 15th, something on Dr. Martinez's monitor caught her attention. Deep in a canyon system over 12 miles from the nearest trail, her drone's camera detected geometric shapes that didn't belong in the natural landscape. The objects were partially concealed by 18 years of vegetation growth, but their artificial nature was unmistakable. rectangular forms that looked like camping equipment or clothing, arranged in a way that suggested human presence rather than random debris. Dr. Martinez immediately contacted the Mono County Sheriff's Department, reaching the same Detective Rodriguez who had investigated the original disappearance. "I think I found something related to the Hoffman case," she told him. "The coordinates I'm sending show what appears to be a campsite in an area that's never been searched before. It's incredibly remote, accessible only by technical climbing or helicopter." Rodriguez felt his pulse quicken. After 18 years of dead ends and false hopes, could this finally be the answer everyone had been seeking? 2 days later, a specialized recovery team was helicopter lifted into the canyon. The terrain was so rugged that even experienced mountain rescue specialists needed ropes and climbing equipment to reach the location doctor Martinez had identified. What they found defied all expectations and raised disturbing questions that nobody was prepared to answer. Hidden in a natural shelter formed by overhanging rocks, protected from weather and scavengers, was an elaborate survival camp that had clearly been occupied for an extended period. The campsite was meticulously organized, showing signs of long-term habitation rather than a temporary emergency shelter. A fire pit was surrounded by carefully arranged stones, with evidence of multiple fires over time. Food storage containers hung from tree branches, positioned to keep supplies safe from bears and other wildlife. Sleeping areas had been carved out of the rocky ground and lined with pine needles and clothing for insulation. Most disturbing of all, the camp showed clear evidence of 2 occupants working together to survive in impossible conditions. Personal items confirmed the team had found Marcus and Dylan's final location. Dylan's distinctive red backpack hung from a tree branch, its contents preserved by the dry mountain air. Marcus's Park Service jacket was carefully folded near one of the sleeping areas, as if he'd just taken it off moments before. Scattered throughout the campsite were items that matched the inventory Linda had provided 18 years earlier, but their arrangement suggested something far more complex than a simple hiking accident. Hidden beneath a carefully constructed stone cairn, the recovery team discovered something that would change everything. Wrapped in waterproof material and protected from the elements was a journal written in Marcus's distinctive handwriting. The leather-bound notebook contained dozens of entries spanning several months, documenting not just their survival efforts but something far more sinister. The first entry was dated October 15, 2006, 3 days after they'd disappeared. The final entry was dated February 23, 2007, more than 4 months later. Human remains were found in the camp, but the condition and positioning raised questions that forensic experts struggled to answer. The bones showed no signs of animal predation or violent trauma, suggesting peaceful deaths rather than attack or accident. But their location deep in an unexplored canyon, miles from any established trail, made their presence impossible to explain through conventional theories. How had Marcus and Dylan reached this remote location? Why had they stayed for months instead of seeking rescue? And what had happened during those final weeks that Marcus felt compelled to document in his journal? The journal entries would reveal a truth more disturbing than anyone could have imagined, but those revelations were still to come. For now, the recovery team focused on documenting the scene and preparing the remains for transport back to civilization. After 18 years of searching, Linda Hoffman was about to learn what happened to her family. But the answers she'd desperately sought would bring no comfort, only new questions about the true nature of their disappearance and the dark forces that had kept them hidden in the mountains for so long. Detective Rodriguez's hands trembled as he opened Marcus Hoffman's journal for the first time. After 18 years of dead ends and sleepless nights, the answers he desperately sought were finally within reach. But nothing could have prepared him for what those pages would reveal. The first entry, dated October 15, 2006, began with what seemed like a routine account of their hiking experience. But as Rodriguez read deeper, the true horror of their situation became clear. October 15th, 2006, Day 3. Dylan twisted his ankle badly yesterday crossing the creek near Mile 7. Much worse than we initially thought. He can barely put weight on it. We're sheltered in this canyon for now, but I'm starting to worry we might be here longer than planned. The good news is we have plenty of water from the spring, and our food supplies should last another week if we're careful. The early entries painted a picture of responsible wilderness survival. Marcus documented their daily routines, Dylan's injury recovery, and their attempts to signal for help. They built fires during the day, hoping smoke would attract search helicopters. They spelled out SOS with rocks in clearings visible from above. But something changed dramatically after the first week, and Marcus's tone shifted from confident to increasingly desperate. October 22nd, 2006. Day 10. Something's wrong with the search efforts. We've seen helicopters every day, but they never seem to look in the right places. Dylan's ankle is healing, but slowly. We could probably make it back to the main trail now, but I keep hearing strange sounds at night. Voices calling from the forest, but not rescue workers. The voices sound different, older somehow. Dylan hasn't mentioned them, so maybe it's just my imagination. Rodriguez paused, feeling a chill run down his spine. He'd coordinated those helicopter searches personally, flying grid patterns that should have covered every accessible area within miles of the trail. How had they missed a canyon system so close to the main search zone? The terrain was challenging, but not impossible to spot from above. Something didn't add up, and the journal entries were about to reveal why. October 28th, 2006, Day 16. Dylan finally heard them too. The voices come every night around 2 a.m., always from the same direction deeper in the canyon. They're calling our names, but not like search and rescue would. It's more like they're trying to lure us somewhere. We decided to investigate today and found something that doesn't make sense. There are structures deeper in the canyon, built into the rock face. They look old, much older than any mining claims or ranger stations I know about. The journal described their discovery of what Marcus called the settlement, a series of caves and stone structures built into the canyon walls, clearly artificial, but constructed with techniques that seemed primitive yet sophisticated. The buildings were empty but showed signs of recent use. Fire pits with cold ashes, sleeping areas with fresh pine needle bedding, and most disturbing of all, symbols carved into the rock walls that Marcus couldn't identify or understand. November 3rd, 2006, Day 22. We met them today, the people who've been calling our names. They're not what we expected. There are 7 of them living in the settlement, and they claim they've been here for decades. They call themselves the Guardians, and they say they're protecting something in these mountains. Their leader, an older woman named Sarah, told us we were brought here for a purpose, that our accident wasn't really an accident at all. Rodriguez felt his blood run cold. This wasn't just a survival story anymore. Marcus was describing an encounter with people who had deliberately isolated them from rescue efforts. But how was that possible? The search operation had been massive, involving hundreds of trained professionals with sophisticated equipment. No group of people could have hidden 2 missing hikers from such an extensive search effort without inside knowledge and careful planning. November 8th, 2006, Day 27. Sarah explained more about their purpose here. She showed us deeper into the cave system, to places that feel ancient beyond description. There are chambers carved with symbols that she claims predate any known civilization in North America. The Guardians believe they're protecting sacred sites from the outside world, and they've been doing it for generations. She says people are drawn here when the mountains need new protectors. The journal entries revealed that Marcus and Dylan weren't prisoners in the traditional sense. The Guardians provided food, shelter, and medical supplies for Dylan's ankle, but they also made it clear that leaving wasn't an option. Not yet, according to Sarah. The mountains had chosen Marcus and Dylan for their knowledge and skills, and they needed to understand their responsibilities before they could return to the outside world. November 15th, 2006, Day 34. Dylan is adapting better than I expected. The Guardians have been teaching him about the cave systems, the symbols, and what they call the old knowledge. He's always been good with puzzles and patterns, and he seems fascinated by their stories. I'm more skeptical, but I can't deny that strange things happen in these mountains. The way sound travels, the lights we see at night, the feeling that something is always watching us. As Rodriguez continued reading, the journal revealed a gradual transformation in both Marcus and Dylan. The fear and desperation of the early entries gave way to curiosity, then acceptance, and finally something approaching reverence for the Guardians and their mission. Marcus documented learning about medicinal plants, ancient navigation techniques, and what he called mountain wisdom that modern hikers had forgotten. December 1st, 2006, Day 50. I understand now why the search teams couldn't find us. The Guardians have ways of hiding this place that go beyond simple camouflage. Sarah calls it bending the path, making the canyon invisible to those who aren't supposed to be here. She's shown me how they do it, using natural acoustics and optical illusions that redirect searchers away from this area. It's not magic, but it's knowledge that most people have lost. The technical details Marcus provided were disturbing in their plausibility. The Guardians had apparently spent decades perfecting techniques for avoiding detection by hikers, rangers, and search teams. They used reflective materials to misdirect helicopter searches, created false trails that led away from their location, and employed sound manipulation to mask their presence from search dogs. Most unsettling of all, they seem to have detailed knowledge of search and rescue procedures, suggesting at least some of them had backgrounds in law enforcement or emergency services. December 20th, 2006. Day 69. Dylan wants to stay. He's made that clear to me and to the Guardians. At 14, he feels more at home in these mountains than he ever did in town. The Guardians have been teaching him skills that would take years to learn through conventional education. He can navigate by stars, predict weather patterns days in advance, and identify every plant and animal in the Sierra Nevada. He says he's found his true calling. Rodriguez felt sick reading Marcus's account of watching his son embrace a life of isolation from the modern world. The journal revealed internal conflict as Marcus struggled between his parental instincts to protect Dylan and his growing belief that the Guardians might be offering something valuable. The entries showed a man slowly being converted to a worldview he'd never considered, questioning everything he'd believed about civilization, progress, and what constituted a meaningful life. January 10th, 2007, Day 90, 3 months since we arrived. Linda must think we're dead by now. The thought of her grief is almost unbearable, but Sarah says there are larger considerations. The knowledge the Guardians protect is more important than individual families or personal desires. She's shown me evidence of what happens when sacred sites are discovered by the outside world. Commercial development, tourist pollution, the destruction of places that have remained unchanged for thousands of years. The journal entries revealed that Marcus was being systematically indoctrinated into the Guardians' belief system. They showed him photographs of sacred sites in other locations that had been commercialized or destroyed after being discovered by the public. They provided historical accounts of ancient civilizations that had collapsed when their spiritual centers were compromised. Slowly but surely, Marcus began to accept that his disappearance served a higher purpose. January 25th, 2007, Day 105. I've made my decision. Dylan and I will stay with the Guardians permanently. The outside world has nothing to offer compared to the wisdom and purpose we've found here. Sarah has explained the initiation process, the final commitment that will make us true protectors of the mountain. It involves letting go of our former identities completely, including any desire to return to our previous lives. Linda will grieve, but she'll eventually understand that we died serving something greater than ourselves. Detective Rodriguez's hands were shaking as he read Marcus's final entries. This wasn't just a missing persons case anymore. It was a story of systematic brainwashing and cult indoctrination that had claimed 2 innocent lives. The Guardians had used isolation, manipulation, and psychological pressure to convince Marcus that abandoning his family was not just acceptable, but morally necessary. They'd turned a devoted father into someone willing to fake his own death for their cause. February 10, 2007, day 121. The initiation ceremony is tomorrow. Sarah says it will be Dylan's 16th birthday present, even though his actual birthday isn't until next month. The ritual involves drinking a tea made from local plants that will help us shed our old skin and be reborn as true mountain guardians. Dylan is excited, but I'm having second thoughts. Something feels wrong about the whole process, but it's too late to change course now. The final entries in Marcus's journal were written in increasingly shaky handwriting, suggesting physical illness or psychological breakdown. He described hallucinations, memory loss, and periods of confusion that coincided with the Guardians' preparation rituals. It became clear that the tea and other substances they were being given contained powerful psychoactive compounds that were breaking down their grip on reality and their connections to their former lives. February 20th, 2007, day 124. Dylan is gone. The ceremony went wrong somehow. The tea was stronger than Sarah expected, or maybe Dylan's system couldn't handle the plants they use. He started convulsing during the ritual, and there was nothing we could do to help him. The Guardians don't have modern medical equipment, and by the time they realized something was wrong, it was too late. My son died in my arms, far from home, far from his mother, because I believed their lies. Rodriguez had to stop reading. The image of a father watching his son die during a cult ritual was almost too painful to process. Marcus's final journal entries revealed complete psychological collapse as he realized the magnitude of what he'd allowed to happen. The man who had spent his entire career protecting people in the wilderness had failed to protect the person who mattered most. February 23, 2007, day 127. This is my last entry. I can't live with what I've done to Dylan, to Linda, to our family. The Guardians say Dylan's death was a necessary sacrifice, that his spirit will forever protect these mountains. But I know the truth. I killed my son by believing their insane philosophy. I let them convince me that abandoning our family was noble, that hiding from the world was necessary. I was a fool, and Dylan paid the price for my weakness. Sarah offered me more of their tea to ease my transition, but I know what it really is now. Poison disguised as enlightenment. I'm taking it anyway. I want to join Dylan wherever he's gone. Maybe in death I can apologize for failing him so completely. Linda, if anyone ever finds this journal, know that we loved you. Know that I'm sorry. Know that none of this was your fault. The journal ended there, but forensic evidence at the campsite supported Marcus's final account. Dylan's remains showed traces of plant alkaloids consistent with powerful hallucinogens found in certain Sierra Nevada vegetation. Marcus's remains contained even higher concentrations of the same compounds, confirming that he had intentionally overdosed rather than continue living with his guilt. Both deaths appeared to be related to the Guardians' rituals rather than wilderness accidents or natural causes. But the discovery of Marcus's journal raised more questions than it answered. Who were these Guardians, and where were they now? How had they managed to operate undetected in a heavily monitored national forest for decades? Most disturbing of all, were they still out there, waiting for the next unsuspecting hikers to wander into their web of deception and manipulation. The campsite showed no recent signs of guardian presence, but their sophisticated knowledge of concealment techniques meant they could be anywhere in the vast Sierra Nevada wilderness. Detective Rodriguez closed the journal and looked up at the recovery team still documenting the scene. After 18 years of searching, they'd finally found Marcus and Dylan Hoffman. But instead of closure, they'd uncovered evidence of something far more sinister than a simple hiking accident. Somewhere in these mountains, a cult was still operating, still targeting vulnerable people who ventured too far from established trails. The nightmare wasn't over. In many ways, it was just beginning. The Sierra Nevada mountains kept Marcus and Dylan Hoffman's secret for 18 years, but Dr. Martinez's drone finally revealed the horrifying truth. What began as a father-son camping trip became a tragic encounter with a cult that preyed on lost hikers, using isolation and manipulation to break down their victims' connections to the outside world. Marcus's journal entries paint a chilling picture of how ordinary people can be gradually converted into believing that abandoning their families serves a higher purpose. Linda Hoffman finally has the answers she desperately sought, but those answers bring no comfort. Her husband and son didn't die in a hiking accident. They were systematically brainwashed by people who convinced them that disappearing forever was not just acceptable, but necessary. Dylan died during a cult ritual involving powerful hallucinogens, and Marcus took his own life rather than live with the guilt of what he'd allowed to happen. The most terrifying aspect of this case isn't what happened to the Hoffmans. It's the realization that the guardians are still out there, somewhere in the vast wilderness, waiting for the next vulnerable hikers to wander into their web of deception. Their sophisticated knowledge of concealment techniques and search procedures means they could strike again at any time. The mountains that Marcus loved and trusted ultimately became his family's tomb, but the forces that destroyed them remain hidden in the shadows, patient and deadly as ever.